Today, chapter 6 in your textbook of the CBSE syllabus. The chapter is respiration. In this, we study respiratory processes. Respiration in general and respiratory system in particular in human beings are the two important concepts we are going to study in this particular chapter. Now, all living beings require energy, and that energy comes from the process called respiration. Respiration takes place in all the living cells. Respiration means taking in oxygen and giving out carbon dioxide, but that takes place in different ways in different organisms. However, organisms which are very small, one-celled animals, one-celled organisms called single-cell organisms do it in a very simple process, and that process is simply by means of diffusion. They take oxygen and give out carbon dioxide in a very simple process called diffusion, and these organisms generally oxygen from outside. It may be normally water. From the water, they take the oxygen and give out carbon dioxide and release energy. That's why diffusion. And in multicellular organisms, animals with many cells, which we call multicellular organisms, that may be having many cells. In these organisms, these cells will form into a system called respiratory system. Respiratory system includes two things. One, oxygen comes into the system. From the system, oxygen goes to, it is oxygen actually, intake of oxygen goes to cells. In all the cells, there will be reactions and then energy is given out. So respiration is a process in which energy, what you call the energy is given out, will be released or given out. So this is the point you must remember. All organisms respire, and they respire. For that, they require food materials. Food materials normally comes in the form of glucose. We shall study that. And some organisms use oxygen. As I told you here, some organisms use oxygen and some organisms do not use oxygen. There are two types of respiration, one with oxygen, another without oxygen. We shall study that in a greater detail. I have shown you here major steps involved in respiration. The first step is the entry of glucose. Glucose already that is present in the system due to digestive process, that will be entering into cells. Inside the cells, you know there is cytoplasm, and the cytoplasm, in the cytoplasm, glucose breaks up into two molecules. So glucose is a 6-carbon compound, C6H12O6 is a glucose molecule, H12 glucose molecule, that will be having a long chain like that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 carbon molecules. See, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 carbon molecules are there, and that is a chain. And first thing is this chain breaks into 3 carbon molecule, and that 3 carbon molecule is called pyruvate or pyruvic acid. That's what we shown here, and this is the pyruvate. And that in the presence of oxygen, it takes place. When it takes place, that takes place in mitochondria. You know, cells contain large number of mitochondria. It breaks into carbon dioxide, water, and lot of energy is produced. That is normally explained as respiration. So respiration is a process in which glucose molecules are broken down in the presence of oxygen to produce energy. During that process, carbon dioxide and water are also released. In some organisms like yeast or some bacteria, glucose may break into ethanol and carbon dioxide and produce energy, and that kind of respiration takes place in the absence of oxygen. So we have studied now, we can think of two kinds of oxygen immediately. One is with oxygen called aerobic respiration, without oxygen called anaerobic respiration. It is aerobic respiration with oxygen, anaerobic respiration without oxygen. And in our own body, sometimes in the muscles, especially pyruvate undergoes some changes, and that will produce a substance called lactic acid, and then a very slight energy is produced in that. That's also possible. So if a question comes to you about how energy is produced in the body or what is the path of the respiration, you can say there are 3 types. One is aerobic respiration, second is anaerobic respiration, and third type happens in the human beings called the lactic acid production. Here we have called it cellular respiration because I told you already, in multicellular organisms, especially we are studying today human beings, we have a system in which oxygen enters into the system, and that system is called respiratory system. You got a respiratory system, and respiratory system will be different in different organisms. Respiratory system. That is in all the multicellular organisms. Let us think of some multicellular organisms like, for example, fish lives in water. Then you have insects, they live on the land, insects. You have reptiles, and you have earthworm that lives in the moist soil, earthworm. And we also have other animals like human beings. So let us just think of the 4 different groups of organisms. One is fish, lives in water, that has the gills for respiration. That is the system they have, gill system. And insects have what's called small tubes called trachea. Trachea helps in respiration, trachea. And in earthworm, the skin, moist skin helps in taking in oxygen, actually helps in that. And in human beings, we have the respiratory system starting from the lungs, especially lungs helps in that. So that means oxygen entry into the cells is one part, and in human beings, that portion of the respiration in which oxygen enters into system is called breathing. And when once the oxygen enters into the system, oxygen goes to cells, individual cells, it goes to cells. So in the cells, already there will be glucose. Glucose has come into the cells by means of digestive system. You have studied in the nutrition, food is converted into glucose molecule. That's a 6-carbon molecule. It is C6H12O. 6 is one molecule of glucose, and cells will get hundreds and thousands of molecules of glucose. And oxygen enters into the cells from outside. It comes from outside, and these two chemically react. They undergo a lot of reactions with the help of enzymes. When that happens, then carbon dioxide is produced, that will be given out. Water is also produced, and a large amount of energy is produced. This energy will be useful to all the life processes. So now you can say respiration is a process in which food molecules are broken down into carbon dioxide, water, and lot of energy is produced. Please remember that. During the process of respiration, ATP is produced. ATP means adenosine triphosphate. That is the currency in the cells. All the living activities in the cell undergoes with the help of ATP molecules. Energy released during the process of respiration is used to make ATP, I told you. And then this ATP molecule helps in all the living activities. To begin with, respiration, that is glucose undergoes what's called glycolysis. That means it will be broken into two molecules of pyruvic acid. For this, energy is required. It is energy requirement. When once the glycolysis takes place, we get 3-carbon compound, and this undergoes reaction and they produce energy. That is the what's called exothermic reaction, that will produce energy in the form of ATP molecules. So it happens in 2 steps that you will study in your higher classes in detail. ATP is used for all kinds of reactions in our body. Oxygen intake is discussed here. Terrestrial organisms, I told you already, the organisms that live on land, which are multicellular, they use oxygen from the atmosphere. They take in oxygen with the help of their respiratory system. Then oxygen is absorbed by different organs. For example, I told you already, gills in the aquatic animals will be helpful, and trachea, small tubes in the insects will be helpful for absorption, trachea, and skin, moist skin in earthworm is very helpful. And then comes to human beings, we have the lungs, and the inside the lungs, that will be alveoli. Now, alveoli helps in the increase in the surface area, because oxygen will have to enter and it will have to fill up the area. In such, that is, oxygen entry will take place here in the alveoli, and such alveoli will be present in our lungs in plenty. Each lung may contain hundreds and thousands of small structures called the alveoli that helps in absorption. I repeat again, fishes have gills, insects have tracheal tubes, earthworm does in moist skin, and human beings have the alveoli. They are the organs to help to take in oxygen. Now, breathing refers especially for human beings because we are going to discuss on in the respiratory system in human beings. Breathing refers to taking in oxygen and giving out of carbon dioxide. One respiratory cycle in human beings, for example, it has got respiration includes inspiration and expiration. Inspiration is taking in oxygen. During that, lungs will expand and oxygen enters into the lungs into alveoli. Oxygen is exchanged to carbon dioxide in the lungs, and then carbon dioxide comes out by the process called expiration, where lungs will be contracted. For this, taking in oxygen will be helped by nose, lungs, tracheal tubes, and diaphragm. They help in inspiration. They are called organs for breathing. And then when the oxygen enters into lungs into alveoli, alveoli or the air sacs have a heavy network of blood vessels, and blood contains a red pigment called hemoglobin. That's called respiratory pigment. Hemoglobin is normally written as a symbol like HB, and this hemoglobin has got great affinity for oxygen. It absorbs oxygen and becomes what's called oxyhemoglobin. That you remember, the oxyhemoglobin, and that is rich in oxygen. This goes through the blood vessels, through the blood, that is blood containing oxyhemoglobin enters into all the cells. Inside the cells, there will be respiration inside the mitochondria, and then from the cells, carbon dioxide comes out, and that carbon dioxide is again carried by means of hemoglobin, and that will be brought to the lungs and that will be thrown out. That is the process that happens in case of human beings. Now, human respiratory system is shown here. Human respiratory system, I told you, includes nose, nasal cavity. It enters into a place of buccal cavity. There we have the tube, pharynx is there, and pharynx leads into a small tube called trachea. Trachea breaks into two branches called the bronchi, and bronchi divides into bronchioles, and they end up in alveoli. If I just want to show you, that is the nasal cavity, and imagine that is the let's say that's the human figure like structure like that, and then this is the gullet. Imagine this is the mouth, and here is the mouth, and then it enters into a cavity called the buccal cavity. From there we have the long structure called the pharynx, and pharynx leads into tube called trachea. Trachea breaks into two branches called the bronchi. Each bronchi divides into many branches, and these branches are called the bronchioles, and each bronchiole may contain hundreds and thousands of small structures called the alveoli, and I cannot write all those things because they are very small, microscopic in nature. Like that, I'll just show you how you can make a good drawing like that. Alveoli present here, and then that will be covered by means of a covering uh, in the pulmonary system, and that becomes one lung. Similarly, there will be one more lung here that also contains plenty of alveoli, etc. So if you want to label that, you can say that is the buccal cavity, mouth cavity, and that is the pharynx, and then it ends up in trachea. A trachea has, to support that, we have C-like rings. These rings are made up of cartilage, and that will break into bronchi, left and the right bronchi. That divides into bronchioles, very small ones, bronchioles, that ends up in the structures called the alveoli. Alveoli are bag-like structures, and they contain, alveolus is singular, alveoli is plural, and alveoli, they will have a bag-like structure, and where oxygen enters, and then oxygen enters into cells and carbon dioxide comes out. And here the respiratory pigment hemoglobin also takes place. That means a large number of activities takes place in the alveoli. Now, here I have shown that lungs are so important. Many times young people take tobacco in the form of cigarettes or in the form of BDs, hookah, etc. That is dangerous to living beings. They will cause major risk to our heart. It may produce the pulmonary diseases, and different types of cancers are produced. So do not take any tobacco material. Say no to tobacco. That is very important for you. I have shown you here one diagram where people who smoke a great deal of cigarettes, they will have their lungs damaged. Here is an image showing damaging of the lungs, because lungs, especially upper part of the respiratory system, that's what you call the trachea. This trachea and also the small branches called the bronchioles and the alveoli, they have very small, they have very thin structure, delicate, and they contain large number of cilia, hair-like structure. These hair-like structure help to stop entry of germs into the alveoli. They will also avoid dust and other harmful materials. If someone smokes heavily, these cilia will be destroyed, and that ultimately may lead to a bad disease called cancer. Hundreds and thousands of people die because of the cancer of the respiratory system. Therefore, you should avoid smoking. Say no to cigarettes. Here some questions I have shown you. Try to understand the questions and try to answer the questions. What is the advantage of having alveoli in the human beings? That helps in increasing the respiratory surfaces. What is the way in which glucose is broken down? Three types we have shown. One is aerobic, other is anaerobic. One more thing happens in the blood, in the muscle cells. How oxygen is and carbon dioxide transported. For this, you should remember hemoglobin and also human circulatory system. Through blood, it enters into cells via a pigment called hemoglobin. How are the lungs designed? Lungs are designed in such a way respiratory surfaces are increased with the help of alveoli. Write equation for cellular respiration. Remember the C6H12O6 plus 6O2 gives 12 H2O, 6 carbon dioxide and molecules, ATP molecules. In one respiration of cells, there will be single cell produces 36 ATP molecules. One single glucose molecule. Like that, hundreds and thousands of molecules of glucose will be broken down. Each molecule produces 36 ATP molecules. What is ATP? Adenosine triphosphate is the expansion of ATP molecules. That is the currency because it stores ATP, stores oxygen. It stores energy useful to all the living processes, and life processes depends upon ATP molecules. Glucose is very important for respiration. Why tobacco is harmful? You should say tobacco destroys the inner lining of all the alveoli and the upper tract of the human respiratory system that might cause what is called cancer or respiratory diseases. My acknowledgements are due to the authors of Common Creators, Creative Commons, where we can get images that will be from the web. Thankful to them, and we are thankful to Diksha, a portal in which you can get a lot of information about your lessons. And now I request you should read the textbook completely and remember all these points, because one or two questions may come in the examination on respiration. You must remember that examination is very important for you. I hope you will try to understand the definition of respiration. Respiration is a biochemical process in which glucose molecules are broken down in mitochondria to produce energy. That energy is stored in the molecules called ATP molecules. You please remember that and try to remember the equation. Human breathing system consists of nose, nasal cavity, pharynx, trachea, then bronchioles, alveoli. Along with that, in the transport system, blood is important. Blood contains a red pigment called hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is the pigment that carries oxygen to all the cells. Then oxygen is exchanged to carbon dioxide. Again, hemoglobin brings back carbon dioxide, puts it into the alveoli. Alveoli throws it out through, again, bronchioles, trachea and nose with the help of a process called expiration. That is, our digestive system has, our respiratory system has breathing. Breathing includes inspiration and expiration. Thank you.